Sometimes during Christmas, something magical happens.
Hey, Cricket customers. The Max with Ads plan is included with the Cricket $60 unlimited plan at no additional cost. And this holiday season, Max is the one to watch when you're feeling festive.
Son of a nutcracker!
Cozy up to all the holiday classics, like Elf, 8-Bit Christmas, and the Harry Potter 8-film collection. Just log in with your Cricket username and password to experience Max on all your favorite devices. Phone plan streams and standard definition. Programming subject to change. Fees, terms, and restrictions apply. See cricketwireless.com for details.
The following program is pre-recorded.
This is the Paul George Real Estate Show with your host, Paul George. Sponsored by the Paul George Real Estate Group.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of Salem Media Group, staff, management, or advertisers.
And now, here's your host, Paul George.
Welcome to the Paul George Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Paul George, a 30-plus year real estate agent who helps represent people who buy and sell and build homes in the Central Ohio area. Today, we're going to talk about a unique loan that is only for borrowers that are about 62 years old or older. It's a very specialized loan. It's very unique. It's called a HECM loan. But before we get into that, we always start with what's going on in the real estate market. Since I am deeply involved every single day of my life, I think, in real estate. You can't go anywhere without somebody asking you about real estate. But what's going on in the market? And I think people are getting the sense that we're kind of in a diverse market where some houses are still selling in a weekend. But we're also getting some that aren't getting any showings whatsoever. So it's a little confusing. The sellers are confused. The realtors are confused. The lenders are confused. And it's kind of like, why are some houses still selling in the weekend and some are not getting any showings? Well, I wish I had the exact answer, but I do have a thought. First, probably the most obvious ones, if things are slow, is the interest rates. We all know about the run-up in interest rates and how that's kind of tied some people back into saying, I can't afford it now. The payment is just too high. There's also a lot of things politically that's going on. And when that happens, it's the unknown, and people just kind of sit on their hands. They don't do a whole lot. They're afraid to do something because they're always thinking of what's coming up next. They're just not comfortable with the rising interest rates, the politics of what's going on. And, you know, when the interest rates were low enough, people felt a little more comfortable and they would do something about, you know, I got a lot of clients who have offices in their unfinished basement in a cave or something like that. Now they're putting up with that, whereas a couple of years ago when the interest rates were so low, they weren't putting up with it, and they felt the freedom to go out and do something and buy something. So anyway, they're just not comfortable with change. You know, the first reason some are selling in a weekend, it's very simple. It's the price. If it's low enough, it'll still go quickly. And when I say it's low enough, that's the problem that some of the sellers are having, because they have historical values in their head of what their house is worth. And they are always going for the top of the market. So they're pricing their house at that. And we kind of have to normalize it a little bit. And it all depends on the motivation. You know, sellers get disappointed if they don't sell on a weekend. They get disappointed if they don't get the highest price. But if they do price it low enough, and the idea is if you price it low enough, you're going to get multiple offers, and it's probably going to get bid up more than it would be anyway. If the house is in pristine condition, you've got the kind of the unicorn, the best house on the lot, or house with land or something like that, yeah, it'll go even at the higher price, because there's still a lot of people out there with a lot of money still kind of looking. If the exact right house comes up, there will be. There will be multiple offers, and you'll get people there. The other reason on the other scale of why things might be selling quickly is there's still buyers out there who are a little snake bit from not getting in on it 2 years ago. They can't do anything about the interest rate, but they can do something about the price. A quick example, you know, I have a buyer, they were looking last year. They could afford probably a $350,000 house. They had a down payment, you know, which brings their mortgage down to $280,000. At last year, at the time when interest rates were starting to go up, they were at a 4.5% 30-year fixed. And just the principal and interest, it was about a $1,500 a month payment. The same house now, unfortunately, that was listed at $350,000 last year, is very close to 4 to 420, something like that. Unfortunately, the prices of houses are still going up, even though there's less buyers for them. There's still more demand than there are houses, so that's still raising the prices. Problem is now the interest rate's around 7.5, and their payment is now about $2,500. So that's a pretty significant difference. But the way they're thinking about it, though, is if I wait another year, the house is going to be more expensive, and the interest rate's going to be maybe more, maybe less, who knows. But at the end of the day, they know they can refinance. At least that's my job. If the rates go down, which I do think they will eventually, they are going to be able to refinance into it. So they need to lock in now. So those are the people, too, that, okay, I've been looking. I'm tired of waiting. It's time for me to buy the house, and I'm going to pay what they're asking this weekend. So one of the other things that I kind of talked about a little bit last week was a little bit of buyer's remorse and seller's remorse. We're not into that right now. We are into more of, okay, let's just wait and see. Today, though, I'm going to transition over to a very, very specialized loan that is a product that's available for homeowners, home purchasers that are ages 62 years or older. And basically, this product is called a home equity conversion mortgage, or HECM loan, or HECM for refinance. The basic setup is that the buyer is putting down a significant down payment on a home, and then they'll never make another payment on the house for the rest of their life. That's the simplest form I can tell you what that is. And there's a lot of people, I'm 62, so I'm very interested in this. If I've been living in a house for 20 years, I've built up some equity in the house. Now I am very house rich, but cash poor. So if I would sell my house here, I have this bundle of cash and I got to figure out what to do with it. Well, a lot of times what I have left over in that house is not enough to get what I want. My biggest challenge right now in my own head is that I have this big house. It's worth, this much money. The problem is that the new house that I would want, which is an empty nester type home, maybe it's a ranch, but it's brand new. It costs the same amount as what I'm leaving. And I just can't justify that in my head. I'm going from a 4,000 square foot house to a 2,000 square foot house, and it's the same price or more. So if I take the equity out of the house, I can put it down on a house that's more expensive than what I want to spend, but then I don't have to make a payment again. So I'm comfortable with that. My guest today is Gary Campbell. Gary Campbell. He works for Equitable Mortgage, and they specialize not only in traditional mortgages, but they do HECM mortgages as well. One of the reasons I'm bringing him on is that there's companies that do them that specialize in only doing them on new construction, and Gary's going to tell us a little bit about what we can do about refinancing an existing home, or that's one of the things he's going to talk about is some of the ways you can use this type of mortgage. Previous episodes, we talked about the tax implications that are coming. Everybody's house in Delaware County and Franklin County has their house value reassessed, and it's scaring some of the people that have been there because they're seeing this big increase in the value of their home, and they automatically think their taxes are going to go up. And some people in some areas, they just can't afford it. And yes, again, they're house rich but cash poor, and they're wondering how they're going to make these increased payments. We don't know what the property taxes are yet. They won't be assessed till the end of the year. But this is one of the vehicles they can use to maybe get some equity out of their house without moving. So I'm going to introduce Gary. Like I said, Gary is somebody that I've known from a previous life, and he reminded me of that when he appraised one of my houses, because that's some of the other things he does. Gary is going to get into the nuts and bolts of the HECM loan and seeing if it may be right for you. It's not right for everybody. They go through a arduous process of educating you on how the loan works. So I just wanted to make sure that I get an expert in here that can explain those kind of things. And I guess, Gary, say hi.
Hello.
Hi. Introduce yourself. Tell me what your background is. And, we'll get into the HECM loan in a little bit, but I want to know a little bit about some of the other things that you do as well as this and how it kind of ties into what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I've been in about all portions of the real estate industry. I started off as a realtor back in the last century. The last 2 decades or more, I've been the owner of Pinpoint Value, a medium-sized real estate appraisal company. I have 5 other appraisers that work with me. But with appraisal, it's long hours, and I'm about your age, getting ready for retirement myself, or at least thinking about it. And I can't work the 12, 15-hour days anymore. So last fall, I was given a job offer by Equitable Mortgage to open their HECM division. I've been working as an appraiser on HECM loans for 20 years, understand the product very well, really believe in it, and I understand the necessity. Nobody is being pinched more than our senior citizens by the rising cost of living. Inflation, just a 9% inflation we had last year eats 5 or 6 years of cost of living increases for Social Security. So the HECM loan is an answer. It's an answer for about 70% of the people that qualify for them. You do have to have a lot of equity in your home. So in other words, if you've refinanced in the last 5 or 10 years, you may not have enough equity to qualify. But the HECM program has been around. We'll first start with the first reverse mortgage was done in 1961. Those were private bank reverse mortgages. And they didn't have a great reputation because you didn't own your own home anymore. The bank owned your home. You kind of had a life lease on the home. And there were a lot of ways where you could come up on the bad end of that equation. Well, in the recession that hit in the late 1970s and early 1980s, it was a bad recession. If you remember, the interest rates back then were mid-double-digit interest rates. And a lot of the private pension funds went bankrupt, went belly up. And so the Reagan administration understood we're going to have a big problem with the retiring people. We need to support people in retirement. And they took this bad reverse loan product and did something kind of amazing to it. They added the FHA insurance to it, which turned it into a completely different product, which we'll talk about after the break, I guess.
Well,
right?
Listen to you. Yeah. All right. Just remember, as soon as this show's over, we turn this into a podcast, and you can listen to this and the previous shows via my podcast. Just search the Paul George Real Estate Show on Apple iTunes. If you got an Apple phone, just look for that purple button and subscribe to the Paul George Real Estate Show. We'll be right back.
Navigating the complexities of the current real estate market can be a daunting task. Fortunately, you have a trusted ally, the Paul George Group of Keller Williams Greater Columbus Realty. From the moment you start your journey, the Paul George Group with over 30 years of experience will be right beside you, guiding you through every step of the process. Whether it's finding the perfect home or building, skillfully negotiating on your behalf, working with lenders, managing inspections, or handling title matters, their expertise ensures your best interests are always at heart. Don't hesitate to take the first step towards your real estate goals. Reach out to the Paul George Group for a no-obligation consultation. Call 614-570-2853. That's 614-570-2853. Or email paul@paulgeorgerealestate.com. When it comes to making informed decisions in the real estate world, trust the Paul George Group to lead the way. Visit the Paul George Real Estate Group at paulgeorgerealestate.com. That's paulgeorgerealestate.com. Now back to your host, Paul George.
Welcome back to the Paul George Real Estate Show. I am your host, Paul George, and I am here with Gary Campbell of Equitable Mortgage. Just to remind you, remember, get on Facebook and look for the Paul George Group and like me. That really helps boost our ratings a little bit. That's always helpful. If you want to find more information about myself and my real estate team, you can always go to halfthebeatles.com. And the last and not least is I need material for these shows, and you guys are very good at emailing me questions. So email me at paulgeorge@paulgeorgerealestate.com. again, we're back with Gary Campbell, and he was getting into a little bit of what the HECM loan is and why it turned out to be a decent product and how that came to be. As you mentioned, there was kind of a negative connotation for reverse mortgages, and that's what that was. So start off where you left off, because it started to take off when the government started insuring the loan.
Absolutely. So again, the Reagan administration put this program back in place in back 1987. But like all good government programs, it only took them 18 years to implement it. So the HECM loans really didn't start until 2005. They were originally designed as a refinance product, so senior citizens wouldn't have a house payment anymore. As seniors, we get to a point where we've made all the money that we can make. Now it's about preserving the money that we have, and making a house payment can eat into what your available cash is for the month really quickly. For example, I refinanced my house 2 years ago and cut my term down to 15 years, but I will be 73 when I get that loan paid off, and I intend to retire at least by 70. So I'll still owe about $75,000 left on that mortgage. Well, the mortgage is $3,300. My Social Security is not even going to cover that. So I'll either have to work to 73, or I do a HECM loan and they'll pay off that mortgage and I won't have another house payment.
So you got into a specific example. Let's take a step back and give me some of the basics of a HECM loan.
Basics of a HECM.
Basics of a HECM. Tell
Sure.
me. I said that in about 5 words. I think basically you don't have to make a payment for the rest of your life.
Okay.
There's a little more to it, so go ahead and explain.
A little bit more to it. So you have to be a minimum of 62 years old to qualify, which is the early retirement age. It works for anybody that can buy a home together. For example, one of my clients had a long-term girlfriend. They're both on the mortgage, not married, been together for 20 years. That's perfectly fine. Mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, it all works. The difference is the mortgage, what's available, is based off of the youngest person's age. So you can do it if somebody's below the age of the second spouse, or the second party is below the age of 62. There just isn't as much cash available for the equity line. Now, this is a guaranteed equity line that comes with us that increases as you get older. So they allow you access to more of your money as you get older.
Because you're going to die sooner. Is
At
that right?
some point in time, yeah, we haven't figured our way around that yet. Although the part of the problem is we're living longer and longer.
Well, but just like any insurance company, they
Yep.
use actuarial tables to kind of
Absolutely.
figure that out. So
Yes.
it's not some pie in the sky number. It's an actual.
No, if you lived healthy to age 60, generally your life expectancy is about 86, 87 years old. So you need to plan financially so your money doesn't run out before then. And the HECM program is a big piece of that puzzle. In fact, I get most of my referrals from financial advisors.
Yep.
So,
Without getting into too many specifics yet, because I will bombard you with all kinds of questions, because there's a lot coming. And I think just people want to know, hey, this is too good to be true. One of the things that I have learned when I've done a couple of these, and I've been a part of a couple of these, and the people who are using them, they're not somebody who's destitute. They seem to be very financially savvy to begin with. They've got a lot of money. And I'm thinking, then why do you can afford this payment. Why don't you do this? And they have their own various reasons. And tell me maybe a typical client that you might be getting.
So it varies. Senior citizens that are still making a house payment, that can't afford to make the payment anymore. That's one way. That's where we do a reverse mortgage. I have one of my clients that was going to do a reverse refinance and decided, you know what, it's better if I sell the house, downsize, and use a reverse purchase, a HECM purchase, to get the new home. So there's many different ways to use the same product here. But the qualifications are, you have to be 62 or older. You need to live in the home at least half the year or more, so 6 months and a day. So if you have a second home in Florida or something like that, that's perfectly okay. but you do have to maintain residency in the home. So if you have a knee replacement and have to go to a facility to rehab your knee, perfectly fine. But if it's a long term where you're going to have to stay in the facility, then the home would have to be sold.
Let me give you a hard example let me ask you about a hard example, I guess to say. Let's say somebody is 70 years old, and I'm not going to ask you for specific numbers, and they have $300,000 because they just sold their house. They've got this pile of cash sitting on there. Generally, what could they, if they qualified and everything, if they had $300 to put down, what price range of home could they be looking at?
So I'd have to run the numbers specifically, but approximately a 40% more. So you might be looking at 420, 425, maybe as much as 450 that they could afford. And they would have that minimum down payment, and then there would be no payment for the rest of the loan. And
let's just say now, okay, they're not 70, they're 75. I'm guessing that number, they can do more.
It goes higher, yes.
Yeah, they can get more than a $450,000 home.
So
generally,
rough thumbnail is you would take the age of the youngest borrower, subtract 28, and that's about what percentage you have of a cash available to you on a refinance. Okay. So forward, it's when you're doing a purchase, you're kind of adding that percentage a little bit. Now there's also the interest rate and everything that's involved with that kind of changes the equation. So we have to run each calculation separately, but as a thumbnail, we use 28%.
And interest rates do make a difference. People don't see them. It's not hitting them upside the head with it. And the reason I say that is because of the first one I did was when the interest rates were like 3%. And basically they only had to put half down. Right. It was like, boy, this is like a bonus here. I can $300,000, I can get a $600,000, but as interest rates go up, it changes a little bit because of that. When you help me clarify a reverse mortgage. What's the difference between that and a HECM, if there is any difference? A HECM for purchase and a HECM for refinance. When are those situations used, and who would be a good candidate for those?
Okay, so the old reverse mortgage product, there's still some stigma in the market because of that product. So that's why we refer to them as a HECM loan now. There are still private reverse mortgage products out there, but because the HECM has been in place since 2005, we've really forced the old reverse mortgage products to operate almost exactly the way a HECM does. You don't have the protection. For example, a HECM loan is the only loan out there, home loan out there, that's a zero liability loan. So in other words, if you end up owing more than what the property is worth, they will not chase your estate to try to get the extra. That's just paid off by the FHA insurance that's required on the loan. And so it really is an amazing product because of that. They're very, very safe. There is HUD counseling required for each purchaser to protect our senior buyers and senior refinanciers. It's because I tell people there are sharks in the water all the time. You have to be careful that somebody doesn't lead you astray. And this is your most important investment, and you need to take care of it. So the counseling is something that's required for anybody that does a HECM loan, and it's to make sure that somebody is not trying to take advantage of you in some way or talk you into a product that you don't need.
One of the things I started to talk about a little bit before, and give me a concrete example of, I talked about people being house rich and cash poor. Mm-hmm. The 70-year-old grandma has $70,000 left on her mortgage, and she probably has a $350,000 house. She, is struggling to make that final few years of payments, and then she's struggling with her bills. Can she refinance and tell me how that works?
All right, so I have a client that's almost in this exact situation right now. She's got about a $1,400 house payment. She's coming up about $500 or $600 short each month being able to pay her mortgage. So her children are helping her. She has, I think about $85,000 or more left on her mortgage. What we can do is do a HECM refinance, pay off the mortgage. She'd have an $85,000 balance plus the closing costs. The home will continue to appreciate. She will have an equity line on that home that will grow as she gets older. I believe she is 75 right now. So that kind of puts that equity line in roughly about, 47%, something like that, of the value of the home. Why these seem to be too good to be true is the government's allowing you access to what's yours already. You've already paid for the home. That money is yours. But it's a dead asset because you can't use it until you sell the home.
Yeah, it's not liquid until you sell the home. Yeah.
Well, with the baby boomers aging, we've got to keep people in their homes. It's far more expensive for the government to try to subsidize everybody going into retirement homes or nursing homes. It's much better if the population ages in place. So that's why this program was put in place.
Well, and again, I do want to delve into that a little more because I want to get a little more specific. And when we come back from the break, I will definitely ask you, okay, now she doesn't have that $1,400 a month payment period. She has access to more cash if she needs it. Is that correct?
Yes, she does.
That equity?
Absolutely.
So, and then, again, no other payments even if she accesses that.
No other payments.
Okay. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little more specifically to Gary about this loan and see if it's the right product for you. And again, give me your questions, Paul at paulgeorgerealestate.com. We'll be right back.
Submit your questions for the show to Paul at paulgeorgerealestate.com. That's Paul at paulgeorgerealestate.com. Now back to your host, Paul George.
Welcome back to the Paul George Real Estate Show. And again, I'm your host, Paul George. I'm with Gary Campbell from Equitable Finance, as well as Pinpoint Value. Is that the name of the?
Equitable Mortgage and Pinpoint Value, correct.
Okay. So you do appraisals and you give people money.
I do that, not on the same property, though.
Well, that'd be a problem. Good idea. Yeah, it would be a problem. Let's see. I'm going to appraise this one for a little higher so I can get them a bigger loan. Yeah, I think there might be a little conflict there. Hey, when we come back in the third segment, I'd like to get to know my guest on a little different level. I'd like to tell me a little bit about, you told us a little bit earlier about your business and things. Tell me a little bit about your family, where you live, what your aspirations are. Talked about retiring at 70, since my audience is, for this product, is probably the same age as we are, getting close to it. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, my wife and I have 3 kids that are all out of school, not out of the house yet, but all out of school. So that's a good thing. We like to travel. So we'd like to do a lot more traveling. As an appraiser, I work 12, 15-hour days, and I find that as I'm aging, I'm not handling those hours quite as well as I did. And so this is something I'd been considering for a long time, again, because it's a product that I know and I believe in. And look, I've got a lot of friends that are senior citizens that I love dearly that are being pinched, and this is a way that I can help them. We live in the Hilliard area. Love Hilliard, great part of the community. And then we keep a condo down in South America in Colombia that we travel to.
See, there's something
3 or 4 times a year.
Nice. So, is it easy to get back and forth there?
Absolutely. Yep. 2.5 hours to Miami and 2 hours to Medellin.
Medellin.
The land of eternal spring.
Mm-hmm. Every guest I have on, I ask this question. Mm-hmm. And everybody gives me that pause like, If you could instantly learn a skill or one talent that you don't currently have, what would that be?
It'd be nice if I had a singing voice that wasn't stuck between octaves.
Is that the number one answer or what? And she was looking at me like, yep, you're one of those guys too.
My brother's a bass in a barbershop quartet, and he's fantastic. And I've got about 3/4 of an octave in one and 3/4 in the other. I just can't quite pull it off without my voice breaking.
Well, I got to get him over here because he probably has a good radio voice. So maybe I should ask him some questions and things. So, all right, getting back to the HECM loans, we kind of dove into a refinance. And again, when you hear it from the outside, people are just looking at, okay, I don't have a house payment anymore. I can actually access more money to the house. Mm-hmm. This can't be right. how is that possible? You kind of touched on it a little bit with you're basically getting liquidity out of your house some way.
Correct.
There are costs involved in doing this, but it's not out of anybody's pocket, I assume.
No, look, there's interest only added to your loan, but the interest that's added is added to a smaller total. For example, our lady that's refinancing the $85,000, the interest on that will be interest on the $85,000, whereas the home value is about $400,000, and the home will still be appreciating at about 4% plus per year as going forward. So the home value keeps growing, and also the equity line available to her keeps growing. And the interest rate almost doesn't make a lot of difference to a senior buyer because the equity line is guaranteed to grow at 0.5% higher than what the interest rate of the loan is. So their availability to cash keeps increasing as they get older. So in this particular case, if I remember right, if we pay off her loan, she'd still have roughly about $90,000 available in the equity line that would continue to grow as she gets. So in other words, she runs into a medical issue. Mm-hmm. She can pull, instead of touching her stocks, she can pull it out of the reverse mortgage out of her equity line. And the money she pulls out of the equity line is not taxable, whereas the money she pulls out of her investments is taxable. And if she pulls too much money out of her investments, then she loses a portion of her Social Security. So it's, again, because of this situation, most of my referrals come from financial advisors. They're big proponents of this product. It helps them balance a portfolio. At times, they'll advise you to pull money out of your equity line, and at times they'll advise you to pull money out of your stocks when it makes the most sense. Like it's always a bad idea to pull money out of your stocks when the stock market's going down, right?
Yeah, we don't have to be financial advisors to tell people that. They understand that pretty well. We did
stay at a Holiday Inn Express, so we can do a little bit of that.
Let me ask you this. The last one I did was on a new construction.
Yes.
And the new construction has this, it took 8 months to build. So to get the loan, they had plenty of lead time.
Correct.
If somebody wants to do a refinance or even purchase, how long does it take to get the loan itself?
So typically across the country, we're told 45 days. With Equitable, we do our own underwriting. We have our own processor, so we're able to close in 30 days on all of our HECMs, which is important to keep our senior buyers on the same playing field as everybody else. If you're going into trying to purchase a home and there's 5, 10, 15 other people bidding on the same property, if you're asking for 45 days and they're asking for 30, you're probably going to get your contract turned down. And one thing seniors can't do is we can't move twice. It's a big enough deal to move once, let alone moving out of your home and then into an apartment and then into another home again. We really need to put our seniors in a position where they can have very strong contracts and that they can get the home that they need when they need it. So,
talk about your lady as the example with the house payment that she just doesn't want to make anymore. Mm-hmm. So how long did that take? Is the refinance the same as the other? Or does it take any longer?
We can do it in about 30 days.
So she could have access to that other $90,000 in 30 days.
Absolutely.
So, okay. That's kind of what I was getting at because of, again, and I don't want this to be a scare tactic, but people are asking me with the property tax valuations. Mm-hmm. Again, they're afraid they're not going to have enough money to pay the taxes. I think they're going to be shocked at how little their taxes are going to go up, but they just want to be prepared, and they say they don't have any money to pay any extra taxes, doesn't fit in their budget. So I want to backtrack to how long does it take to get this started or to talk to somebody. As much as the convoluted stuff we're talking about here, people are, I'm sure they're just, in a fog with all the different information. There is resources available, and as you said, they have to take a class, basically.
They have to take a class. That's an FHA class. I think the one that's in person is over by the airport. I think the Ohio Housing Authority. Mm-hmm. It gives the only one that's in person. Some of them are over the phone or online.
I say my person had to do it over the phone.
Right.
This was during COVID, so that's
sure.
It could have been the reason why too.
But they have different options for different people.
Yep. let me ask you some specific questions here. You talked about you said you have a house in South America. Can I use it for a house here and a house in South America, or house in Florida, I should say?
You can only have one HECM loan at a time.
What if I have two wives?
Well,
Okay.
I don't know if you could put it in your wife's name or not, but that would be a...
Well, joking aside, though, what are the you talked about qualifications.
Okay.
How do they have to qualify? If I don't have to make a payment, what am I qualifying for?
So interesting. The one thing that you do have to continue paying is your insurance, your property taxes, and if you live in an HOA, you have to pay the HOA fees. That's really what you're qualifying for. So if you've got a 550 credit score or an 850 credit score, the interest rate is the same. The only reason they check your credit is to make sure you don't have any government defaults on loans, which would disqualify you. So even with a bankruptcy, relatively recent bankruptcy, the people can still qualify for a HECM loan. So they may have to have their taxes and insurance. It's similar to an escrow, but it's called a LISA, which the bad LISA's with an E, and that's where your taxes and insurance for amortized years are taken out of your equity line. So, but then they wouldn't have any interest payment or they wouldn't have any taxes, insurance, or HOA fees because that would be taken care of with the loan as well. I haven't done one of those loans because that's the loans we avoid. I mean, most people don't want to do that because then they don't have very much equity available to them.
Right. With that, like I said, the last one I did was on a new construction. Mm-hmm. So they had their property taxes. They had their HOA fees, which were like $350 a month. So you only have to show enough income to be able, just like you would getting a normal loan, just that little bit. I mean, Social Security would cover most of that. Is that
correct? So, in fact, when we're checking somebody's credit, yes, we do check the credit score to make sure there's no defaults, but we're actually checking 2-year history on paying their taxes on time, paying their insurance on time, and paying their HOA fees on time. So we actually are doing a completely different credit check than what a normal credit check would be. And as far as the ability to repay, the ability to repay is the fact that your home is worth enough to pay for this loan when it's paid off, along with the FHA insurance. So
when I did this with the last person, there was only one company in town that would do these. Why aren't other normal brokers or normal banks, why aren't they doing these, or why aren't they promoting them if they do them?
So I believe there's only 2 mortgage companies in town that actually do HECM loans other than people that work directly for the HECM companies themselves. Like there's Mutual of Omaha people in town, there's Liberty Mortgage and people in town, and there's Longbridge people in town. I happen to have all 3 companies with Equitable Mortgage. So I have access to running the loans through either of those 3 different products. I'm not a captive. I can do.
That's the advantage of having a broker. Basically, you can go pick and choose. It's not like you're tied to Chase's product.
It's not as big of an advantage as you think, but it's a little bit of an advantage.
Well, again, these are things that you need to give me a call so I can point you in the right direction of how to get this information. Gary, at the end of the next segment, he's going to tell you how you can get some literature, as well as you do classes all the time too, don't you?
I do. I have a class tomorrow as well.
What's it called?
What the heck is a HECM?
That's what the heck is a HECM. That's what a lot of people ask me anyway. So when we come back, we'll have one more segment, and we'll be right back.
Navigating the complexities of the current real estate market can be a daunting task. Fortunately, you have a trusted ally, the Paul George Group of Keller Williams Greater Columbus Realty. From the moment you start your journey, the Paul George Group, with over 30 years of experience, will be right beside you, guiding you through every step of the process. Whether it's finding the perfect home or building, skillfully negotiating on your behalf, working with lenders, managing inspections, or handling title matters, their expertise ensures ensures your best interests are always at heart. Don't hesitate to take the first step towards your real estate goals. Reach out to the Paul George Group for a no-obligation consultation. Call 614-570-2853. That's 614-570-2853. Or email paul@paulgeorgerealestate.com. When it comes to making informed decisions in the real estate world, trust the Paul George Group to lead the way. Visit the Paul George Real Estate Group at paulgeorgerealestate.com. That's paulgeorgerealestate.com. Now back to your host, Paul George.
Welcome back to the Paul George Real Estate Show. Again, I'm here with Gary Campbell. We're discussing HECM loans, which are for people 62 years and older. My last segment, I always start off with kind of my tip of the week that has something to do with real estate or buying or selling a home. This week, I just want to kind of keep it flowing into what we're talking about. If you are 62 years or older and you need to downsize, or you're cash poor and house rich, we need to have a conversation about what your future plans are. And it's not necessarily just your housing plans. Do you like to travel? Do you want to go see your grandkids? Do you like to purchase art? Do you lifestyle type things where you need to free up some cash? This is the conversation you need to have with me, and then I'll point you to the experts when it comes to this. So when we talk about selling your home and downsizing or your next move and you need some cash, give me a call and we can have that discussion. And, sometimes you want to sell, sometimes you stay there and just get an equity line. Sometimes you sell and keep some of the cash so you can do the things you want to do. There's just a lot of different choices you have available when you can start unlocking the equity that you have in your home. This is one of the vehicles you can do it in. So, as I mentioned before, I'm going to start hitting Gary with some very specific questions. That first question that people ask me about HECM loans is like, okay, my mom is 70, my dad is 68. They have a HECM loan. What happens if mom passes away?
Okay, the HECM is still in place as long as either spouse is alive. The HECM doesn't close out until the last spouse moves out of the home. Either they are deceased, or they move into a nursing home, or move in with their children, or something like that. At that point, you would need to put the home on the market. You have 6 months to sell it with 2 3-month extensions. So as long as you're making progress toward the sale, they'll give you up to a year to sell the home.
Another real life scenario that may have to do with that. Okay, dad's passed away, mom's still living there. She just broke her hip. She has to go to the hospital, get surgery. Now she's going to be in rehab for the next, 8 months. She's okay. Is that right?
It's supposed to be 6 months, but yeah, I would think you could get a waiver for something like that. And I don't know that anybody is monitoring it that close.
I was just going to ask, how do they know?
Right. Well, they do send you a letter once a year that you have to send back to confirm that you're still occupying the home.
Okay.
And if those letters don't get returned, then they're starting to ask questions.
Somebody asked me about this because of mom passed away. You got the boomerang kid who came back, and he's like 58 years old, but he's the caregiver for that parent. And what happens then if in 3-4 years after he turns 62, mom passes away? Is there a possibility he can still keep that or not?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
One thing we could do is we could refinance in
his own
a HECM loan.
Yeah.
So from HECM to a HECM, and we could add him. It would reduce, if he's 58 when we did it, for example, he could still qualify to be on that loan, and literally the loan would go on until he was no longer living in the home. So it could go on another 40 years.
Okay.
And that there would still be no payment there. Again, you can do it with siblings. Like I have 2 old great uncles that lived together until their late 90s, still on the family farm. That could have worked for them. The HECM product is really kind of a diverse product, so it can be used in a lot of different ways. The subtle gray divorces. I didn't even know before I started this job that there was such a term as a gray divorce, but senior citizens divorce, that's the term. where, you know, they were able to do a HECM and buy the other spouse out of the house with that and still keep the house.
Here's one. I've got this very real example right now. I have a condominium listed. It sold the very first week that we got out of it. It was, let's say it was $500,000. Mm-hmm. She bought it new 6 years ago with a HECM loan, and it was like $250,000 or so. Right. The house is appreciated $250,000, but the $250,000 she put down, I think, is being used to pay the mortgage. But when that appreciation, she's doubled the value of the home.
Correct.
Does she get to participate in any of that? Because she hadn't made any payments. Oh,
absolutely. No,
so
it's still
when
her
I
home.
go to sell it, she's going to pay off the HECM, which is probably more than the $250,000 that she started with, but she still gets to keep everything after that.
Whatever's left over is hers. That's her appreciation.
Okay.
Again, it's just a mortgage. It works like any other mortgage. You pay off the loan, and they're really designed to be very balanced for the first 18, 20 years of this loan. For the first 10 years of the loan, you'll see your appreciation keep getting higher and higher. So you have your down payment or your starting amount on the loan will keep growing and growing and growing through about 10 years. And then about year 10, it starts to stair step back down to what your original down payment or your original loan amount is. Usually hits about equal at about 18 years. So if you sell it anytime within the first 18 years of the loan, generally you're going to have more money in your pocket than what you started with when you purchased the home. So it's fantastic. So you can use over your lifetime. These are really designed to be your last mortgage, but you could technically sell and move to Florida and do another HECM and, you know, it work out just fine.
You touched on this a little bit, but thinking back, the opposite of what we're talking about with appreciation in 2006, 2007, when the market tanked, there were a lot of bank-owned properties and things like that. Somebody has a HECM mortgage and they pass away, but the house isn't worth near what they put into it. Is there any liability with the owners, the kids, the estate?
No, these are insured by the FHA. So the FHA insurance would kick in and pay off the loan balance if there was any additional loan balance. Let's say this usually happens if people long outlive the HECM loan. So, for example, if your life expectancy is at 87 and you live to 97, at some point in time, you're starting to run out of equity, right? Let's say the home value is $500,000 and the loan balance is $550,000. The insurance would kick in and pay off that loan. So in other words, the state is not paying that. And if the children want to keep the house, they can still do that. If the appraiser comes in and values it at $500,000, they can buy it for 95% of the appraised value. So they could buy it for $475,000 and keep the home if they chose to.
So they can even buy it back.
They can even buy it back at a discount. Yes.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned, you said you're getting a lot of referrals from financial advisors, and why? Tell me why that. They've made a ton of money in the stock market. They just want to pay off their mortgage. They have enough cash to do that. What's a good reason for why they wouldn't want to do that and use a HECM loan?
Well, the HECM line of credit, first thing, is fantastic. As I mentioned, it grows at 0.5% higher than what the interest rate is. Right now, if our interest rate is 7%, that equity line has grown to 7.5%. If you're a senior citizen, you've got your money in more conservative products at around 4%, your equity line is actually growing quicker than your assets would be in the stock market for most cases.
Just to formalize that a little bit, let's just say I've got a HECM line of credit for $100,000. The interest rate is 7%. I haven't touched that HECM line. At the end of the year, now I have available $107,000 with the 7% interest.
Correct.
So it does grow more than. So it's kind of an investment that they could take out that 107, even though it was only for 100 originally.
Right.
I just want to make sure that was right.
107.5 because it's a 0.5% higher than
Well, there you go.
Right.
You get the extra 5%. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of things giving that kind of returns right now anyway. As much as interest rates went up, they're not that much. So that's one good way to participate in something like that. We talked about, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, people from different walks of life. You know, you talked about gay couples. You talked about people who are not married, who are just friends.
Yeah.
There's no restraints on who can live there or who can be part of the loan.
The only restraint is the age limit. So in other words, 62 or older, or a non-borrowing spouse that's younger, or non-borrowing, for example, the son that was 59 would be a non-borrower. They could continue, if the older borrowing spouse or borrower died, they could continue to live in the house until they pass as well without a mortgage payment. But if they're non-borrowing, they would be cut off to the equity line when the borrowing spouse died. That's the problem.
Okay, here's another extreme example that, again, this came up with the kids of somebody. Mm-hmm. Dad is 90 years old. Mm-hmm. He's single. He qualified for it. He probably had to put the least amount down just because of his current age.
Yep.
But he marries a nice little 65-year-old, and at 91, he passes away. The 65-year-old, she has no other obligations other than to live there.
Correct.
Is that
correct? She could stay in the house for another 35 years.
See, they need to put that on the Golden Bachelor or the Silver Bachelor or whatever you got to call that. That's one way to.
Well, and the nice thing is this product works as well for the middle class as it does the wealthy. And you're seeing a lot more wealthy people that are very savvy using this product.
And that's kind of what I talked about a little bit before, my experience. Real quick, Gary, you talked about some classes. You talked about some information. How do they contact you? Where do they find you?
Well, I'm at Equitable Mortgage, so equitablemortgage.com. Gary C. at eqfin.com for my email. My phone number is 614-749-9666. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do you guys have is there any information on the HECM on the website itself?
No, I'll get those two
contact
people contact
me
directly, and I'll get that.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and we'll have a new show next week when I figure out what it is. I'll talk to you next week.
This has been the Paul George Real Estate Show with your host, Paul George. Sponsored by the Paul George Real Estate Group.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of Salem Media Group, staff, management, or advertisers.
Tune in next week for an all-new episode of the Paul George Real Estate Show. And follow Paul online at paulgeorgerealestate.com.
Some things are better in person, like the Grand Canyon, or a business meeting where you finally shake hands with that person who never turns their camera on. With a range of travel solutions for businesses of all sizes, we can help you make the most out of every trip. American Express Global Business Travel, for better travel returns.